Alright guys, welcome back. This is Shadow Drake. Alright. This is actually the beta for the terrain rework. Hopefully it'll be out. Or, if you're watching this, it'll be out. But let's go over a topic that's going to be kind of pertinent once the terrain rework comes out, and that's going to be the power transmitters. Now, the whole reason about the power transmitters is that, well, before the terrain rework, bases were kind of secluded to like a spot. You didn't really build far, you didn't need far. And the only reason to build power transmitters is if you didn't really want to run cables from, one end of the base to the other. You could just use these things to kind of just set up power to separate little areas and just power some other devices without running cable. But with the terrain rework, we're going to have regions, and these regions are very far apart from each other. And the biggest thing is for the deep miner regions, you're going to want to have some deep miners. But depending on where you are, you could have a completely different ore composition. And so that actually introduces some logistic problems, or a lot of problems that you have to solve regarding logistics. One of them being, well, what about power? Do you just want to build some solar panels, wind turbines, or some kind of like self-contained, solid fuel generator at the outpost that mines specific ores? And then after that, you have to power that tiny base. You have to do all sorts of sorting and stuff, and then you gotta give yourself a way to come back, or we eventually got to figure out the logistics for how to get the stuff out from there and back to your base. And so that's going to be kind of an exciting time, probably for some, maybe not others, where basically we're just going to have to figure out those logistics, including routing power. Now, what I know some people are upset about is that they don't want to run hundreds of meters of heavy cables. And honestly, I don't doubt that. Honestly, I feel like running hundreds of meters worth of cable and chutes and stuff is probably a terrible idea, because you basically will need those deep miner regions to fund the crazy habit of connecting your base from literally kilometers away. And not to mention, you could have mountains, you could have valleys, and all that stuff. It's just going to be a pain. So let's cover the power transmission side of things. Now, we do have the power transmitters. They work, they work for a really short-ish range. As far as material cost, 5 gold, 7 copper, 3 steel. And you can see that in the Stationpedia power transmitter. And the kit power transmitter, 5 gold, 7 copper, 3 steel. Hello, kitty cat. My cat is bothering me. But you need 2, because you need to craft a receiver at one end and a transmitter at the other. So let's just say 10 gold, 14 copper, and 6 steel is what you need to effectively have power transmission over a significant distance. However, and like I said, it can transfer up to 5 kilowatts at extremely short distances. However, how much gets transferred drops, depending on the distance. Now compare that to heavy cables. They cost half a copper and gold each. Now they can transmit the full 100 kilowatts of power, because higher than that you break the cable. But do you really want to run meters and meters of cable to route that power? Like, a heavy cable probably it takes about 3 for about a meter. So if you're going to do 200 meters of transmission, 200 times 3, that's looking like 600 heavy cables. Give or take a couple. That's a lot of 600 heavy cables. That's 300 copper and 300 gold to route power that far. Now, if you really want to do that, go right for it. But I mean, let's just find, this is an engineering game. You can solve that logistics in different ways, at least until the devs adjust these. So let's look at the statistics for the power transmitters. At 100 meters between the receiver and transmitter, 4.64 kilowatts transfer out up to 5 kilowatts. Now, when I say that, you have to be able to feed the 5 kilowatts to the transmitter. If you can't, you actually transmit much less. So I'm assuming that you're trying to feed the full 5 kilometers here. At 200 meters, it drops at 3.9 kilowatts. Okay, not too bad. 300 meters, you're 2.36 kilowatts. I want to say somewhere around 250 to 270, somewhere around there is where you get to halfway. Alright. If you get to 400 meters, you're transferring only 643 watts. That's just slightly better than a solar panel. And if you get to 500 meters, you're basically transferring nothing. At that point, it's literally nothing. So based on what the power transmitters are, you can use this to kind of decide for yourself how you want to split up the distance load. The distance. So, maybe 200 every 250 meters, maybe that's roughly around the halfway point. That could be like a good point where you just build a spire, build a transmitter receiver pairs, and you double up on them. And let's just be honest, for outposts that are specifically deep miner oriented, if we look at the deep miner itself, they use 500 watts each. So if we're doing the 300 meters, so that's enough power for 4 of them, and you still have a slight surplus. Now you might need that slight surplus because you're gonna need to also put centrifuges. Now honestly, I will personally do combustion centrifuges because much faster processing. But if you want to actually do electrics, just keep in mind that electrics have a completely different RPM. It's 100 watts, and you need roughly 2 to 3 centrifuges per deep miner. Just keep that in mind. So if you're going electrics, then you're expecting to sink somewhere around 800 watts per deep miner. So if we do that math, then you probably can only set 2 deep miners and electric centrifuges to handle that load. But if you want to use combustion centrifuges, not only do you introduce the logistics of having to funnel fuel over there, but for deep miners, we'll need about 2 combustion centrifuges, maybe a little bit less to handle it, unless it's nitrous fuel base. If it's nitrous fuel base, you only need 1. But yeah, just giving you a heads up for what to expect. So, and quite honestly, even for as far as regions are concerned, you know, this region where I'm at currently, it's just pure iron. Would I really need to have a lot of iron? If the answer is yes, then maybe 2 deep miners and centrifuges will work. If I need more, I could go higher. Personally, I'm not entirely sure that you could even use up that much unless you really like to build. But I digress. But if we put it this way, if we're going to have a distance of 300 meters for this, then at least 2.36 kilowatts is kind of good. I probably would like to go for 2.5 kilowatts because there's going to have to be some form of automation there. Especially if it's supposed to, there's going to be live support. Okay, but enough about that. The logistics. So what's with the aligning? Now, aligning is best done with an IC10 script, and there is one on the wiki, the Stationeers wiki, and you can probably find some in the workshop that can basically do that. And this is really done for transmitter receiver pairs that are going to be in absolutely weird askew locations, that are not going to be straight shots. By straight shots, I mean quite literally go, from this large station battery, you just go literally straight, 200 meters that way straight. If you're going to have something like there, then you're going to need to do more complicated math, but it is possible to just align them without needing the IC10 script. It just requires that you use basically straight lines. A complete horizontal straight line transfer in one direction. Now to do the math, that's just the basic trig. Math alert, skip ahead if you don't like it. But it's just basic trigonometry to come up with the horizontal and vertical position. Now, for the horizontal positioning, you need the X and Z position for the transmitter and receiver pair. And you can pull out your tablet and it says that, but if you actually also look at the transmitter itself, they give that data as well. And then, of course, you need the Y position for the vertical, in addition to the horizontal position. So now, one thing to note is receivers can link up to a logic transmitter. So if you set up the receiver on one end, you can read it at the transmission end to kind of get the X, Y, and the Z values for the receiver. However, this is a one directional thing. You still need to be able to send the values to the other end. So you still need to set up some kind of IC10 script and a way for you to manage the angles that you get. Now, for getting the horizontal, you need to know the difference in the Z and the X positions and then do the arctangent of the X delta and Z delta so that you can get a degree. Now, if you do this in IC10, it's going to come back to you in radians. So you have to convert that to degrees because we work from 0 to 360 here. And then depending on how your align the transmitter receiver pairs, you might need some offsets like 90, 180, or 270. And that's just so that you know to rotate it so that it gets to the right spots. And so that's basically the math. You need the Z delta, X delta, X delta, Z delta. Now I do have to say that you have to keep the units consistent. Like I have Z2 and Z1. It really doesn't matter which one you find it because these are complementary. They're going to, the same angle you get is going to be essentially what the other is going to need, just with some offset. Now, the way this goes is, for example, Z2 might be your receiver, Z1 might be your transmitter. You can do it backwards. Honestly doesn't really matter how you do it. You just keep that straight. You don't want to do Z2 minus Z1 and then do X1 minus X2. That completely changes, that can kind of change the way that the angle will come out, and that could lead to some error. But yeah, anyways, you just convert, once you get A10 to and IC10, just basically you provide those two numbers and you get a radian. Multiply by 180 and multiply by 180, divide by pi, and you got a horizontal. Then of course offset it. Now, the vertical is not as different, but you do need the difference in the y, but you also need the hypotenuse of the z and the x. Now this is all right triangle theory, so because keep in mind the distance between the two, you still need to know the horizontal distance, and then the y is the elevation distance. So you do need to know the hypotenuse, and that's good old square root of a squared plus b squared equals c. That whole fun stuff. So y delta, same thing. Try to keep the units the same way you want. The hypotenuse is just z delta squared that you found before plus x delta squared, which again you found before. Take the square root of that, and now you have your hypotenuse. You have your horizontal distance. And then of course a10 to y delta over hypotenuse. Same old, same old. Convert to degrees because it's a radian angle. Multiply 180 divided by pi. And then of course you need to offset that angle by 90 degrees because it only really gives it to you in, typically from 0 to negative 90 to 90 is typically what it gives you. So you need to add 90 to kind of get it arranged correctly. Alright. Math alert, it's done. So to all of you people who didn't want to deal with the math on that, yeah, okay, let's take a look at a test bench setup for alignments. Now, interesting thing that I've noticed is when these things are aligned, they will only use up as much power as what they are capable of sending. Now, I basically have one transmitter here, two receivers there, one transmitter here, one receiver there, different batteries so that they can use up the power. So let's turn this one off for now. Now, this is just to kind of go off the whole points. When they're aligned, you see that this is just is aligned to that one. You see the light. This is short distance, so I'm getting close to the 5 kilowatts. There is some loss because of that. And then just to go over that, if the transformer in this case is a little bit less than that, it'll transfer significantly less to here. And I forgot the analyzer. Whatever. So at this point, I'm only transferring 3 kilowatts and sending it that way. So just keep that in mind. Now, as far as angles go, now I do know now some of my favorite. I made this easy by making this a 45-degree triangle. Basically 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that's the position. So really, the offset is 45 degrees. And the vertical. As you can tell, the vertical goes up to 180 is straight up, 0 straight down. Since these are on the same plane, 90 degrees, that's flat, horizontal, no distance change. Now, as you can tell, this one is set to 135. This one is also set to 135. And the way to kind of get that to match up right is if you're having the transmitter, just make sure that the data connection ports would kind of be 180 degrees offsets. That basically fixes the horizontal angle. So you see this horizontal is pointed at 90, the receivers are pointed at 270, and that gets this, that aligns it perfectly as far as horizontal is concerned. And now, unfortunately, you can only link one transmitter per receiver. Now, I will move this 10 degrees because I calculated that to, it's not quite exactly 125 degrees, but you see 125 degrees here matches 125 here. But now you can have a little bit of error to them. Just a little bit of error. See, it's technically 124, but it's still connecting. 123 is still connecting. Over a great distance, this error can be really bad that they won't connect. So you do have to be a little bit careful about that, where you might need the math. But again, if this is an extreme case, but you can work with 45-degree angles, 0 and 90-degree angles, because, you know, so long as it's a straight shot on the same plane, you can use a vertical of 90. Now, when you're doing up and down, which is probably something that's gonna happen because, you know, terrain is not gonna be straight, you know, there's some down there too. Now, it's the same thing, you know, these are on the same horizontal axis, so when I use that, it's 90 degrees here. This one is in a really weird angle, so it's not exactly 90, it's 180 in this case, because that's how much I needed. But now, I made sure that they matched up, you know, 45-degree angle. So you see this one is 45 degrees vertical tilting down. This is going to be 135 tilting up. This is to show off that the vertical angle, you do need to have some, you know, that 90-degree offset is what is needed. So hopefully this kind of at least lets you see that you can align them. Now, I have no IC10 scripting for this to align them. And as a test bench over here, what you see on all those dots over there, this is just a test to see just how much power is taken. See that this first one is 100 meter distance, then 200 meters, then up there's 300, 400, and 500. The only reason I built those up there is because I didn't scope that area out and there was a mountain in the way, so I built them higher. But as far as things are concerned, just to kind of go over with the short one, see, I noted these values, 1492, 264, well, 1492 and 264, because the Z is the only thing that changed. So if I just jetpack straight away, you can see that my Z value is the only thing that's changing. And so when we come back to here, see 1492, 265, 265, 264, yeah, that basically lines up. And then if I were to keep going further and further, you know, there's the 200 meter one, and this is kind of why I'm holding the minor cartridge, because you see I'm still in the same Planitia, Solstilia, so that's iron. If I were to keep going, the region might change to something else. See, okay, now we're at Rima Serpentis, you know, this is going to be about 300 meters away. So if I really wanted to have a deep miner outpost here, you can see that from that station, if that was a power station, you know, I'm transferring about 2.4 kilowatts of power. And you can see this is a pretty significant distance. I don't know that I want to cable it up all the way, but yeah, I just wanted to show off the distance between them. Alright, now that we're back here, this is where the power test came in. So at 100 meters, when I just turn this on, that will link up to the first one, and you see 4.64 kilowatts. So that's a pretty significant amount of power I'm sending that way. That could power quite a big outpost. But again, that's short distance. The 200 meters one, 3.9 kilowatts. That's still a significant amount of power. And the way I know that this is the 200 meters, the 200 meter test standing here, okay, I'm a little bit less than 200 meters, but that's still pretty close by. That's a good chunk of power. Now, once I go up here, this is where the 300 meter test comes in, and you see 2.36 kilowatts. So this, you know, that's capable of reaching that silicon outpost that we saw a little bit over there. Oh, wrong one. Come on. 300 meter test, there we go. So yeah, that's capable of that silicon outpost. And you see 2.64 kilowatts, that's good enough if I only want to put like maybe just 2 deep miners and just have a small outpost there. You know, handle the logic there. Uh, Now when we get to the 400 meters, you see that this is a this is a very big power drop. That's 643 watts. That's just barely enough to actually work in powering the beacon over there. Like I'm spending half of that power to power the beacon. That's 400 meters away. So yeah, very low gains. And then of course 500 meters, it's basically nothing. Oh, this way. In fact, I actually had to put an RTG there in order to see it, but that's so far away, that's basically nothing. I'm better off having a midway point, you know, at 250 meters, you know, send this power first to the 250 meter point, and then from there send the other power from there, because at least at that point I'm sending 2.5 kilowatts. But it is significant. It's a significant change. Now, the only reason I mention that is because so far the size of the map, it seems like the regions are somewhere between 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. Actually, it's more like 4 by 4 because I think they reach from X and Y from 2000 to negative 2000. I mean, X and Z 2000 to negative 2000. So 4 kilometers 4 by 4 kilometers. This is kind of workable, I guess, in my opinion. I haven't tested it too deeply. It's kind of workable to getting a good amount of power transfer at relatively short distances, especially if you have like a central battery hub and you send out power to different outposts and installations from there. You know, so long as you're within 250 meters or build a multiple relay station, you should be able to transfer power in a decent way. Because after all, the name of the game of Stationeers is also learning how to be power conscious. Now, what I have over here, where you see that other light, that's what it would be, a small power installation. And so you see over here, I'm grabbing 14.3 kilowatts from these 4. So, you know, that's actually a pretty decent amount of power. So let me just turn off these ones over here just to get a better idea of how much I'm actually transferring. So yeah, it's about 3.56 kilowatts of power. And that installation over there, once I find it, is about 230 meters. So you see, that's still a little bit over the halfway point. So it just kind of goes to show that it's not super bad. Now, what I've done, these are actually an IC10s because not only are they completely different heights, but more than likely when you build an outpost like this, coming down to a point at, you know, at a different angle, if you're not going to use cables, you know, if I didn't build something at level and then cable all the way down, you're gonna very likely need an IC10 because what is gonna happen is the X, Y, and Z positions of all of these need to match up with another X, Y, and Z. So what I am going to do, just to kind of show that, we are going to mess these up a bit. Because what I have right now is I have 2 scripts. The way I have a script that I developed, and what it does is I do have the X, Y, and Z and the index transmitted and receivers communicating between both ends. It's not a very efficient script, but I got that going so that I could get this worked out. And so what ends up happening is when I flip this on, this IC housing is going to be talking with the one down there. And down there is going to give me the X, Y, Z positions of, you know, transmitter number 1. And then up here, it's going to find receiver number 1, get its positions, and send it down there. And once that happens, they're going to calculate, they're going to sync themselves up, rotate to match up, and then, you know, ideally they're just going to link up and sync up. So right now it's that one. I think on the... Yep. Alright, see? they're both changing. See, that one has linked up. This one has now linked up. That one should link up. That one's linked up. Ah, this one might be off a little bit. Or is it linked up? I can't tell. Interesting. They're all linked up now. Ah, I think I know what's happening. I'm out of power down there. Yep, I'm out of power down there because the beacon one is going on or off. So that's what's happening. But yeah, that's what I got. So up here, this is going to be cycling through indexes to see just how much is you know, where these need to rotate and go. And if I go way down here, you're just going to have a very similar scale. And alright, made it down here. So, okay, turned on my coal generator over here for power, because I need power. And you see, it's basically the same setup down here. I have, really weird positions for these, but they're all linked up to their own respective receiver in awkward fashion. And yeah, that's how they run. That's how they go. So if I remember right, T11 needs to link up with R11. So you see 271 and 106. So let me hop back up there again. Alright, so 271, 106, and I check back, it's this one that lines up with it. Now, here's the thing. The one down there, 106 plus 73, that basically makes 180. So you see, they kind of complement. What one says going up, the other has to make up the difference. So what would simplify it is knowing that fact. Now, unfortunately, when I did those, I lined up the data ports, and that basically means that I have a 180 offset. So 180 plus 91 is 271. So that's how the angles line up. So it's just a good thing to know. So what would heavily simplify the code is, so long as the transmitter is capable of reading its respective receiver's angle or positions, the transmitter can calculate the horizontal and vertical positioning it needs to link up to here. It can then use transmitters to send the horizontal and vertical positions it used to the receiver, and then the receiver can basically use the same horizontal if the data ports are facing opposite directions. It'll use the same horizontal, and then as far as vertical goes, it takes whatever that vertical reading is and subtracts it from 180. And that should link it up. And that's how that works. Now, just to kind of go over the whole thing, I'm just going to mix up my receivers on my code. So I'll put 25E right here, 2B99 right here, 374 right there. I'm just gonna export that. This is gonna change the complete ordering for the pairs. Oh. And it's gonna force all of these to change positions and relink up. So that one's linked up. I really hope that I actually have it set up on the other end. I probably don't. Oh, I also don't. Ugh. Let's just remove this and rebuild it. These things are also smart in the sense that they only pull the load for what is needed. Ah, you see, there we go. They all linked up, even though I changed the numbers around a bit. So now my numbers are different, slightly different, but you can use that to a great degree to link up transmitters and receivers, no matter what awkward configuration you have. Now remember, they're only one-to-one. So I'm getting my 14.2 kilowatts of power from down there. And even though I completely messed up the order. But yeah, you can do the same thing down there. So I know I didn't go too in-depth on these, but hopefully this can be a tool that can be used. And like I said, more than likely the workshop has stuff to do. I'm currently working on building my own script for linking different sets of receivers and transmitter pairs, because I do intend to use these to power, let this be like a power pylon and let those go to outposts. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you then, and let's build some good outposts and get over the engineering hurdles and challenges to power them all up. So thank you for your time and have a good day. Bye bye.